Casual Magic has been brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can get cool stuff. Use the code CASUAL for 5% off your order. We're also sponsored by Quiver Time, makers of the Quiver and Bolt deck cases and other fine card holding accessories. Use the code CASUAL on their site for 10% off your purchase. And by Architect, a deck hosting website that doesn't sell anything, but they like me and I like them, so kindly use them for all your deck list needs. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivam, and Casual Magic is brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., Architect, and Quiver. Today, I have a very interesting guest with me, a very interesting conversation to head. This is the famous Twitch streamer Jorbs, who has been doing a lot of like Slay the Spire stuff. I've seen him play games with Luis Scott Vargas, and I recently read like a good half to 2/3 of your memoir that just came out before we go live, and I was like, wow, you have lived many different lives, and I thought it would be very interesting to have a conversation. So thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome to the show.
Of course, thank you for having me.
So for my more magic focused audience, can you tell us a little bit about who you are? Like, what do you do normally, or what do you stream basically?
I am a strategy game Twitch streamer, and content goes on YouTube as well, so I guess I'm a YouTuber at times.
Aren't we
Um,
all?
I started with chess, but I spent a good 8 years through my teenage years in particular focused on Magic the Gathering, so that's where I know
Yeah.
Luis from and things like that. And from there, I went to poker. Poker is very competitive and can feel very isolated as well. And
Oh
I
yeah.
burned out on that pretty hard. Wanted a way to play games that was a little bit more collaborative, a little bit more social. And I found Twitch. And that's what I've been doing full time for 7 or 8 years now.
It's fat. Like, wow, there's like so many questions I want to ask just off of that lead-in sentence.
Please.
But I'll start with the first one that comes to mind, which is the fact that it is fascinating to me when people are like, "Yes, I found Twitch and it gave me a sense of community, a camaraderie, a whole collective kind of interaction that's much less lonely than just playing games by yourself, or especially poker, which is such a solo sport. Even when you're in a casino in
Hmm.
person, it's still very much a you versus the numbers. The rest of the table could be doing whatever they're doing. um but it's wild because like when you think about Twitch just abstractly, it's you talking into a microphone and staring into the black eye of a Logitech camera or
True.
whatever,
Yeah. It is a
and
very
it's just
empty
like
room.
it's a deep empty room. There's nobody here, nothing going on.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's so empowering and so freeing to see just like people hanging out with you. And yeah, we're not having a conversation, but they're having a conversation, text, and reacting to what you're doing, and building off of your actions, which is an incredibly powerful feeling. Um, what have you seen from Twitch? Like, what has kept you there?
I think creating content has always been a hobby of mine, and it's to some extent been more interesting than playing the games themselves. Has been
Mm,
talking about the strategy, making a guide, reviewing a level, something like that. And what I found was when I was making YouTube videos about that,
mm,
things like this, the comments would come in with people writing really interesting responses like, "Oh, it's really interesting that you're thinking about this card that way. I had never thought of that before. Have you thought about combining it with this thing?" And in YouTube comments, those conversations would sort of have like a day turnaround where
mhm.
I'd check out the comments the day after the video and then I'd respond and then maybe get something back 2 or 3 days later. So I was like, "What if I live streamed this?"
Mm,
And on Twitch, you get those conversations immediately. So I
yeah.
actually started out as a Twitch streamer and became passionate about streaming on Twitch because of strategic conversations that I could have with viewers while I was streaming live, which is really ironic because now 7 years later with a much larger audience, I do not allow those conversations in my channel anymore. At some
Yeah.
point, the audience scales to a point where I've actually lost the ability to have that. So why am I still there? I still like it. Also, it pays the bills.
Well,
Paying the
I mean,
bills is crucial.
that is a big deal. It is hard in the content game to be able to pay your own bills, and when
Mhm.
you can through Twitch or the medium YouTuber, whatever it is, we cling to that because it's so hard to get creative. Like one of the existential crises of folks like us who are content creators who do this for a living is that doing it for a living is hard to do. And
Mhm.
to get money, to build an audience, to be able to actually be able to live off of this requires so much of yourself, of your time, of your ability to like constantly be there for the people who are going to pay you. And then once you get to that threshold of like, wow, I can live comfortably off of, Patreons or sponsors or whatever it is going on, your audience is so large, you lose the rapport that you were just speaking about.
Right.
Because I've noticed, especially like in Twitch, you've got this like window of like one to like, let's say 400 or 500 viewers. You can at least have some kind of conversation back and forth. You recognize names. You can see people in your channel who come up, people who give gift subs, all these things. And you get this kind of like community, right? This vibe, this place that you can sit and hang out.
Definitely, yeah.
But then when you like expand and like your numbers are like exponential, you're in like hundreds of thousands, aren't you?
No. I have 100,000 followers.
Well, yeah,
In
okay.
terms
So
of live viewers, I trend toward, like, 1 or 2,000
yeah,
concurrent,
but that's
probably.
still so many people.
For
Like,
me, the strain starts when I get above, like, 1,500. I
mm,
definitely what you're saying with, like, below 500, yes, there's very much a community feel. You'll have extended conversations in detail with individuals while you
right.
stream, and going from 500 to 1,500, you start to lose some of that, but I still definitely recognized most of the people on my channel. I have lots of subs who have been subbed for 6 years at
Many,
this
many
point,
months, right?
so yeah, I recognize those names for
Welcome
sure,
back
and
for the
I
150th month.
yeah. And I chat with people on my Discord all the time as well, so there are people who I genuinely know pretty well.
That's
But
important, I
above
think.
1,500, it starts to fray at the seams for me, where there are just messages that I'm not even seeing because chat's
Yeah.
going too fast and so many new people a lot of the time that's hard to remember who's
Yeah.
new and who's like who have I said hi to already or yeah, yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, because I've noticed, especially like when you watch like, a Brian Kibler playing Hearthstone or something compared to say a Magic player, his Hearthstone streams are like thousands of viewers concurrently, and he can make a play, and you'd be like, "Oh man, you should have used this card," and your thought is just swallowed and shot off screen so quickly, nobody's got any conception of it. And if you're having a side conversation, it's distracting to everybody, so you can't have
Yeah.
chat. So it becomes less like the community feel and more like people shouting at their TVs, right?
Yep.
Like American Idol level of like
Which
just
is that's why I said you're not allowed to have strategic conversations anymore. Like I've basically clamped down on enough of the types of chat in my channel that I think are not helping anybody,
Mhm,
that hopefully we can have still some deep conversations despite having a couple of thousand people in the audience.
mhm.
That's been my goal, and I think it's been somewhat successful. Rubs some people the wrong way, but they can watch somebody else. That's the beauty of Twitch.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Everybody the thing that makes Twitch so compelling from the viewer angle is that you can throw in your 2 cents and know that the streamers may respond to you, and then you get
Mhm.
pissy when they don't, and then you can go and send slurs to them on Twitter, and it's great. Um, Not that this has happened to me in the past day or so. Thanks, Watsy, for
Yeah.
sending, so Wizards put out a Lord of the Rings set, which is absolutely gorgeous,
Oh,
and they, alongside the folks who run Middle Earth, decided they wanted to diversify and change the look because they don't have the movie license. They can't afford the movie license, so they're like,
mhm.
if we're going to just go off the books, we can reinterpret it however we want, and
Right.
it's gorgeous. And they've made stunning things, and they made Aragon black, and they made like some of the other characters, and they're beautiful and stuff. And I'm like, this looks rad. And as goes on the internet, some people get very unhappy about changes to their favorite characters, and
Right.
then they get racist, and it gets stupid.
Yep.
Um, but like I mean, that's one of the things. Like, I don't want to get too far afield because I think you've got a really compelling story that I want to go into. But how do you handle moderating your chat or handle keeping your chat at a human level and not like just insane asylum?
Uh, oh my.
Oh, goodness
I
gracious.
have a Twitch chat on my camera. That'll go away in a second. Um, I think about it in terms of there's an expectation when somebody enters this strategy gaming stream of a white male on the internet. There's an expectation that perhaps I care a lot about winning and I'm competitive. There's an expectation that I think in a very masculine way, probably involving making women invisible, like assuming that my opponent is a male, stuff like that.
Mhm,
And when someone comes into my channel, often they have these preconceived notions of what my strategy gaming stream will be like. And what my strategy game stream actually is very different. And so in my experience, there's a lot of friction when I'm getting a lot of new viewers, and that requires a lot of moderation to reinforce, hey, we use they as a pronoun for opponents if we don't know their gender.
mhm.
Or, hey, we don't backseat strategy on this channel. You can't do that. Um, and that's for me a matter of sure, I have the channel rules when people come in. I also have moderators who understand the rules and can time people out. And I have videos explaining why are these rules. So if somebody gets timed out and doesn't like it and wants an explanation, I don't have to do it live or anything. There is a 30-minute video that I made. Go watch it.
30 minutes?
Yeah, yeah. Um, yes, um,
That's
absolutely.
fantastic.
For a variety of different subjects, there are 30-minute videos each. Um,
So, you've been grounded.
yes. And that is how I approach moderation. I'm pretty aggressive about getting rid of things that I don't like as quickly as I can so that I can continue doing the job in the way that I enjoy for the people who are going to enjoy that. Because I know realistically, as a human being, going to work every day and having people saying stuff that I don't want to have to deal with is just not good for my health over
No,
time. And it's as somebody who tries to make an entertainment show for 160 plus hours a month sometimes, it's not a good idea to be trying to do that while people are saying stuff that's upsetting me all the time. So,
exactly, and, I mean, Twitch is a two-way street, right? Like, if you wanted to just talk without the audience, that's what YouTube is for. So,
mhm,
there's, like, this level of having to cultivate your community such that you don't need to tell people the rules because they all understand, and they're here because they respect and want that to be part of that kind of environment. Um, so, like, because in your book, because I was reading it, and the reason this topic is, I mean, this conversation is starting a lot heavier than a lot of mine do, mainly because of the fact that, like, your book covers a lot of your streaming journey, and a lot of it is also kind of simultaneous with the rise of bro culture in streaming and in, like, in esports and in all of these kind of, like, I mean, esports has been bro culture since Quake 1, right? Since Fatality, since, like, all the early 2000s or whatever. But with the rise of, like, being able to stream and having, like, international teams and all this, it's very testosterone. It's very, like, because look, when I started in the games industry in, like, 2005 or so, um, E3 was still like a place where you could go and see booth babes, and you would see, like, arm candy, and anybody who's like a woman in dev or in journalism and stuff was just gonna get the most rancid kind of commentary, even from when we were doing our early, like, real media streams or whatever the hell we were doing our live podcasts and stuff. It would just be like complete trash heaps. And as time has gone on, people are more cognizant of that. People have gotten a lot better about it, but not. But at the same time, it's, like, also gotten significantly worse in other ways. Like,
mhm,
Gamergate happened, and that was all of my friends and also myself getting lit on fire for things that people had grievances about.
yeah,
And it's been, especially now that we're on this whole on-demand culture with Twitch and with the fact that, like, at 2 in the morning, I can log on and see anybody anywhere playing whatever game I want to play just to entertain me. And then it gives you this sense of entitlement of, like, I'm giving you my hours instead of giving it to anybody else. You owe me. And
yeah,
then that leads into, like, I mean, you got certain protections being a cis dude and a cis white male, but if
that helps a lot.
yeah, if there's a girl who's
Yeah,
streaming, the expectation is this trade-off exchange of, like, I'm giving you my time, therefore you owe me some series of disgusting somethings,
yep.
right? Like, show me your socks or
Or
whatever it
even
is.
even just affection
Yeah,
and consideration, even
exactly.
things that are small entitlements that don't necessarily seem gross or overstepping, but actually are when you consider that this is somebody who's at work doing their job, who you don't know. You're
Oh,
not
yeah.
entitled to anything from them.
There is this sensation that some folks get because my persona is a lot like who I am, which is a very friendly, open. My DMs are always open. People are always willing to I'm happy to let people contact me or whatever. But there's suddenly this expectation of like, oh, we're friends, and now I'm
Mhm.
going to talk to you all the time. Hey, how come you're not replying to me? Hey, the demands start to come, and the kind of like, oh, I'm going to be at this con that you're going to be at. Let's meet up. Or hey, I'm going to be in your state. Want to hang out? And it's like, oh, now we're getting past this conversation and into creepy town.
Yeah.
And it's your audience, as your audience grows, you end up with this weird set of just like, it just gets weirder, it gets
Mhm.
weirder and weirder, like, overall.
And you try to assert boundaries, but there's never, in my experience, a boundary that quite communicates that you don't want people to feel entitled to you in any way,
Right.
in a way that everyone will understand. Like, even if
Because
people hear, "I don't want you to feel entitled to me," they'll still think, "Well, then I'll do things for you," or something. So they'll volunteer to help you out with this or that, and then as they do, then they start being like, "Oh, and now you're my friend," right? Like, no, again, you're not entitled to that from me.
Yeah, like, I mean, I don't wanna be a negative Nancy. Obviously, there's a lot of upside to this because from a mental health perspective, it is wonderful, especially as gamers, we're isolated by nature. We like
Mhm.
to sit in our little caves, get on our PCs or Switches or your PS5s or whatever it is,
I love
play
it.
our games, and then just, like, I mean, playing games is a single solitary, hyper lonely thing, and now, I mean, at least multiplayer games exist. When I was a kid, they definitely didn't, but, like, being able to play games with other people is a like a rebirth of that ideal of when you're in like elementary school and you're lying in front of the TV on your belly and your friends are over and they're yelling at you like make Mario jump higher and you're like I'm trying, all those things. And it's Twitch brings the like at its best, Twitch brings that feeling back in spades, right? Like when
Yeah,
you're just like, "Oh no, I fell in Minecraft," and there's 150 people going, "Oh no," and you're like, it feels really rad.
and
Um, or
even in
when we can, like, collectively watch Street Fighter tournaments and watch something amazing happen, right? Like
yes. Even in terms of becoming friends with a streamer, I have made friends with people from my community. Like, I do have people who are in my community who started out as just viewers whose name I didn't know, who are now my friends, and I consider
yeah.
them my friends, which is something that I'm sometimes, like, hesitant to say because it gives people who want to be my friend the idea that that's a thing they could
This is
try to
an
get.
opening available.
Right, but that's not it. It's that, like, I
This is an
I do have
organic growth.
energy to befriend some people, and sometimes I choose to do that. It's just, like, you don't get to decide that I'm going to be your friend, you know?
I mean, that's just how life is, right? Like,
Yeah,
friendship is organic. I mean, you can try to foist it on someone, but really, if you're a cool person who makes them feel good about hanging out with you and people don't think that you're trying to get something from them,
yeah,
then friendship happens. It's like it's when people are like, you want to be my friend so that you can either climb a ladder or you're trying to get something from me or you want the prestige of hanging out with somebody cool. That's when it's like, well, I am a human still, and I would like to not be your vending machine of friendship. Uh,
yep,
um, so let's pull back a step to a little bit of a lighter topic for a second.
okay.
Um, s- sorry, I don't mean to pivot, but I'm just like, damn, this is spiraling, and I want you to talk to me. Um, so let's talk about when did you discover magic?
I moved to the United States in 1999,
From
December, from New Zealand. We
that
grew up in
explains your accent.
Auckland, New Zealand, yeah, and one of the things that I knew about myself was that I liked games, and so when we arrived, my parents took me to the Wizards of the Coast store, actually. Here in Seattle, they had, like, 2 of those. I think they opened 6 locations ever, and they've now all shut down, something
Hmm.
like that. But they took me to the one in Crossroads Mall, and at the time I liked Warhammer, so they had Warhammer, so I was buying some of that, and then they also had Magic the Gathering cards, and I was like, "What are these? Let's try it out." Um, yeah, absolutely fell for it. Got super involved. I would say it took 2 or 3 years before I was playing in a way that resembled being competitive at all. But, I played very casually, like, went to Friday Night Magics and drafts with my friends from
Mm.
middle school and high school, and then I eventually found Magic the Gathering online,
Oh,
Modo, and
the
I read a Mike Flores article, and he said mono blue control is really good. Now, this is in a format with affinity. Mono blue control was not good. Um but I spent 120 bucks on my mother's credit card to assemble Mono Blue Control, lost like 10 matches in a row, and then one of my friends was like, "Hey, I saw you're getting into Moto. Do you want me to lend you Affinity?" And I was like, "Okay." And since then I have, you know, never looked back. I hit number 1 rank in constructed and number 3 rank in limited on Magic Online, and I worked on some decks for Pro Tours, but I never really played Hyper Magic,
Nice.
so I played a few PTQs, I, like, had some top 8s, but I never quite made it to the Pro Tour.
Wow, that's you're far better at Magic than I am then. I've been playing for a very long time, but I found my happy place and I just sat there. Instead of trying to be like, I'm going to go into tournament tier, I'm just like, I just want to play kitchen table scrub Magic. But if there's one thing that Mike Flores is good at, it is excitedly selling you on the most bad direct pile that he's working on this week. In his hand, it might do gold, but in our
Mhm.
hand, it is not going to. I love Flores. He's one of my
Yeah,
favorite like writers in Magic history. But
he's a very good writer. Sometimes I think he looks for a story in a deck maybe harder than he should be. Um,
yes,
yeah, but he is a very entertaining writer for
yeah,
sure.
but he can definitely lead you down some weird paths if
Yes,
you're
he
not.
can.
Um, but I've noticed like between like Magic and like Slay the Spire and stuff, you find yourself like leaning towards more like card game type of board. Like Slay the Spire is not
Yeah,
technically
I
a card
do.
game, but it feels like one.
I think Slay the Spire appealed to me because ever since I'd played Magic, I'd been looking for an experience that was an hour to 2 hours long where you played a single player card game,
Hmm.
and it's really weird to me to say it now after 5 years of playing Slay the Spire, but really before Slay the Spire came out, I lived in a world where that game didn't particularly exist. Um, there were very few options for something like that before Slay the Spire was released.
At least commonly and easily available. Like Cultsept was out there. Cultsept Saga, if you never played that on the
I have
Xbox,
never played that.
it is fantastic. It was on the Xbox and like Game Cube. I don't know. Some one of the mid tier of like consoles was. It was a Japanese card game slash board game. So you went
Hmm.
around a board, you ran into enemies, and then you had your single player deck and you fight against them, and your winning and losing would help you go forward and backward. It's a very, very fun game that got like an audience of 20 people in America and then never showed up again.
Oh, wow.
But if you haven't seen it, I think it's right up your alley given the games
Huh!
I've seen you play.
I have
You should totally check
never
it out.
had that recommended to me before, which is
Yeah, Cult Up Saga is great.
impressive
It's
because
really, really good.
yeah.
But you're right though. They're like for me, Chandelar, the old Magic on single player game was like that's what I want. I want
Mhm.
single player card games where I can beat up on an AI and not feel bad about like ruining somebody's day. And like Slay the Spire gives you that same kind of like I can just dunk on this guy and do like the most heinous stuff and it doesn't matter because the computer is just going to come back for another fight.
Yep.
Um which, because I have a conscience, makes me feel a lot better. Like, I hate building hyper combo decks and then going against a human and being like, "I just crashed, like, 45 minutes of your life, sorry."
Yeah.
It's bad for
There's
competitive multiplayer.
there is a consent element to playing against another person in a game of Magic the Gathering, I think, where for me, I always in order to play competitively, and I've played Magic casually as well, and I wouldn't say that you're a worse Magic player than me if you've found a way to play Magic at a kitchen table and enjoy yourself. That sounds like a very good Magic player.
It's belittling myself as part of the brand.
Oh, sure. Well, competition in Magic is not the be all end all by any stretch of the imagination. Um, But yeah, I always wanted to find someone I could compete against where they would agree with me essentially, sort of implicitly. I wasn't like I was signing paperwork with them beforehand, but I wanted to know that my opponent and I were not trying to cheat. We were trying to do our best to win and that we were leaving that at the end of the game. Like there weren't going to be any
Hard feelings or
feelings
anything.
that were holding over. And
Mhm.
I found it genuinely very difficult to ever find that in Magic. Like, at a PTQ, people were cheating. On Magic Online, people were getting in your DMs and yelling at you. Uh, it just, like, felt hard to find people who would consensually play that game with me, and that's one of the reasons that I largely don't play competitive games anymore.
Mm. I mean, that we call that the rule zero conversation, where you sit down and establish the notion of what game are we looking for so that we
Yeah.
can agree to not waste each other's time, right? Like, I want to make sure the next hour to 2 hours that we spend together, both of us are enjoying ourselves and getting what we want out of the game. And if that's a single player game, that means if I win or you win, we knew going in what we were getting into. And there's no like, oh man, that scrub, like, yeah, of course your deck just feeds you the best cards, like,
Mhm.
man, shut up. Just you knew what you were getting into, chilled out. But it's much harder in a casual state when we're sitting here and it's like the end state is entertainment. And
Right.
you're like, okay, well, I find my fun in stopping you from playing. And you're like, that's
Not fun.
I'm not sure this is gonna work out for us.
Yeah.
um, but your book is fascinating because like you go into a lot of just what this kind of competitive, like, and it's not even like competition in terms of like fighting against other players, but like competition for eyeballs, for views, for ads, for like your team growth. But just what has, in a nutshell, I guess, what has your experience been like growing as a Twitch streamer and doing these like esports and seeing like these teams come up? I realize that's a very
I
big question.
It is a huge question, but I have a 1-minute answer, I think. I could also give you a 10-hour answer, but I don't think you want that. I found that the first thing I cared about as a Twitch streamer was working out how to grow and succeed. And
Hmm.
so I learned about calls to action and I learned about how to build a community and I learned about how to create a little group of streamers who would host each other to basically make it like our show was on 24 hours a day. If I wasn't live, somebody who I hosted all the time was live. And I built my channel up that way, really catering to people, letting people feel entitled to me so that they'd come back. And eventually I got to a point where I had like 600 viewers or so. And I looked at my bank account and I realized, hey, I'm making enough money that I don't have to work hard in ways I don't like anymore if I don't want to. And kind of ever since then, I've been pulling back and just trying to run my channel the way that I enjoy. And so I've seen a lot of people sort of pass me in the night on Twitch where they really want more. They might get to 1,000 viewers, but then they want to get to 2,000 viewers. Or maybe they're at 300 viewers right now and they're still struggling a little bit for bills. So they're really cutthroat and want to find their next content avenue or whatever. And meanwhile, I'm just kinda hanging out like, "Oh, I make enough money, I'm doing fine, I bought a house, I have a community I like, I whatever." I so, my book
I
is
mean,
about
that's a
joining
dream, right?
yeah. My book is about joining a professional esports team and what happened in the 2.5 years following while I was on the team, and
I'll be
not
honest with you, it does not sound like it was a good idea or a good time.
yeah. I'm happy I did it once, it's
You have the
fun
experience now, right?
to know what things are like sometimes, but, yeah, and I met some really good people, but I also saw enough things that seemed wrong that I had, enough to fill a book with, which isn't great. You'd never want a memoir about bad things to be long enough to publish as a paperback book. Yeah.
I'm actually really curious about that because I was reading this, I'm like, what prompted you to want to put this into text?
I found out that they hadn't paid me for 3 months,
Oh, jeez.
and I got really mad, and I started writing what I thought would just be an angry journal entry, honestly. Like, I was assuming that there was no way I was gonna, like, make this a blog post or a twit-long or anything because these are people who I had an NDA with that was extant at the time, and also people who had spent a good chunk of the last 2 years with and, like, trusted them and just it didn't feel appropriate to air our dirty laundry or whatever. But I kept writing, and I kept writing, and I kept writing, and it was like 20,000 words long, and I looked up how long a book was, and it's 65,000 is like a short book, so I thought, "Gee, this is, like, getting kind of in the range where I could convert it into a book." And so I talked to my manager, who also worked with a team, and in, like, one conversation with her, it became very clear immediately that there was another 20,000 words to write there. And
Dude,
also and also the stuff she said was like, "Oh, I do not have to respect these people I was working with. This actually should maybe get published."
it's
And
like turns
so,
out when you work with skeezy, terrible people, it's
yeah,
important to spread that knowledge such that other people don't get caught in that trap, right?
yes. But
But
also, it's not I get the comment a lot that it sounds like a very negative book, but that people come away from it feeling hopeful or introspective, like not feeling outraged. And that was really important to me too, is that what my content tries to do always is it tries to synthesize complex things into something that's comfortable and approachable that you can then enjoy and maybe even make use of in your life. So when I'm playing a strategy game, I'm trying to do it in a way that is comfortable and approachable and will help
mm,
you on your strategy game runs. And writing a book about joining an esports team, yeah, there are bad things to say in there, but also I wanted to say, like, well, here's what I consider to be a failure of empathy. Instead of just saying it's a failure of empathy and being angry, why don't we talk about what empathy is and how could people be more empathetic? And
yeah.
we're seeing strategy gamers use their skills to be manipulative. What are other things strategy gamers could use their skills for, which would make the world a better place instead? So that's
Yeah.
what I tried to do with the book.
I mean, that I'll be honest, that's one of the big reasons why I wanted to talk to you is because of the fact that I feel that you are using the tools that we've been given through things like Civilization or other games that we sit and play all the time. And instead of trying to manipulate the system to benefit yourself or to privilege yourself, you are uplifting this community, or you're at least trying to bring awareness to these situations. Because, like, I can if I was gonna read a book on like on a Twitch streamer joining an esports team, I would not expect like at least a third to half the book about the various ways women experience awful sexism and like being held back and gaslighting and glass ceilings and all that in the industry. But it's like it's important. We need to talk about that, and especially from positions of privilege, we need to be able to sit there and say like, look, we have benefited from these systems, but these are people who are helping us get here who are being held back or being abused by this system, and it's not okay. Right. And I think that you do an incredibly admirable job in this text, especially talking about Hannah. Is that your manager, right? And
Yes. Yeah.
about her story and like going from just abusive situation to abusive situation. And I'm like, just reading this poor woman's life story. And I'm like, this is like just tragic and just
Hmm.
I I'm glad that you 2 found each other such that you can help and build and like, grow together in a healthy way and not just like acting as the doormat for the next sleazoid to
Yes.
go climb up
And
the ladder, you know?
you haven't read the last third yet, so you've missed the triumphant arc conclusion. So
Okay, well, let me fast forward.
um yeah, I think a lot of men in my position also don't realize how much worse the world is because of sexism targeted at a woman. Like, we know that the sexism's at a woman, and we're also told that, like, we are the ones who benefit from the patriarchy and so on and so forth, right? And these things are true somewhat, but also the world would just be a much better place if we empowered more people, if we had more diverse voices, if we had a community that wasn't traumatic for half of the human population just to exist in. Um, Gaming would be better. The world would be better. My life would have been better. So,
Okay, so I went and skipped ahead and I read to the the epilogue and the last few things. I'm like, "Oh, so you did get a really good triumphant happy ending." That's
Yeah,
actually now I'm excited to see where this goes because not gonna lie, you definitely set up a very dark opening, but it's nice to know that there's light at the end of that tunnel. That's very I was hoping, I mean, it's weird because like you don't want to sit and again, that's like the weird sense of sexism and of like patriarchal like notions of like, of course they're going to get together in the end, but it's also like as a human, I want the person I'm reading to be happy at the end. I am not a grimdark person. I'm not from that era of writing. I like to know that things resolve. And so it's nice to see that you too have found your way out of this very deep hole that the story puts you into, as it were. Um,
yeah. I think we both had our own resolution that made sense for us as well, which was nice, and only partially because I was writing a book. Like, definite definitely, if I said every single thing about my life and about Hannah's life, it would have crossed a lot of boundaries for both of us. So the material in the book seems like a tell-all memoir, but there's still boundaries set there
well, I
where
mean,
some of
there's
it's
got to
kosher
be,
for the
right? Like,
story and some
yeah,
isn't. Yeah.
but Um, I feel like we've been kind of like talking around it a lot, and I don't want to like really go into detail because I think this book is worth reading because I think it's really interesting to get the perspective of you and your growth pattern and like because I can see you going through these kind of like troughs and like hills and troughs of like, look, I'm growing as a streamer, I'm getting very large, and then I'm getting connected to these people who are patently terrible for me and are just bad for society, frankly. And watching you go through these kind of like leaps and bounds, but at the same time, you keep a very even keel and you keep a very and one of the things that I found very interesting about the book that is very hard to do is you manage a sense of perspective and you manage to keep this sense of like, hey, these things are happening, but you can objectively step back and look and say, like, look, this is the system that this is these are like the abuses, these are the sorts of bad behaviors that are being on display here. And you can objectively look at that and show your growth and like change from that. And that's very hard to do, especially when you're so intimately involved because it's your own story. It's
Yeah.
hard to step back from your own story and look and say, like, yo, look, these are the mistakes I made. These are also the places where I saw other people making mistakes. And this is how I've grown from that. That is, that's not easy. Like in my other
Uh,
life, I'm a priest and I talk to a lot of people about like, you know, issues that they have with like themselves or society or things that they want to unload on somebody who's an open ear that's going to listen to them.
right. Yeah.
And listening to people go through their growth and go through their uh, challenges, the one of the biggest challenges I see is trying to get people to take a step back and look objectively at what the scenario is because people very much always want to bring the grievances onto themselves of like, oh, this is happening to me, I don't deserve any of this, or none of my actions caused any of this, these are all bad things. But being able to step back and say like, yo, this is this thing that I was part of, these are what these actions led to, this is the problems and situations I saw, and then not only being able to look at that now and analyze it, but also the fact that you were able to step back from it in real time anyways and be like, yo, I don't want a part of this. That takes a lot of gumption and a lot of like inner strength.
Yeah, I think I finished the manuscript in like 2 weeks, the first draft, basically, and then I spent 2 years editing it and trying to bring more vulnerability and more introspection and more honesty to it. That's and tidying up the grammar, obviously, but,
Well, yeah.
I had 2 professional editors help me with it. My publisher helped a bit. I think, it's so important to look at the system that you're in and see that you yourself are making mistakes, because with that perspective, you start to realize that the people who are, like, the bad guys in quotations or whatever, may be actually quite similar to you. There may
Yeah.
just have been, like, one moment somewhere where they accepted a job, or where, I don't know, a family member had something happen to them and all of a sudden they had to just do what they could to make money and leave their sense of
Mhm.
what was right at the door. Or they had a friend who was like, "Hey, this is a cool way that we can make money," and they thought that their friend was an okay person, overruled their ability to actually consider whether it was the right thing to do or not. And yeah, a lot of the bad events in the story are situations where the worst actor involved is someone who isn't that different from me. And that's terrifying, honestly. Like
I
for me,
mean,
and I hope for a lot of my readers who look up for me, look up to me. Yeah.
isn't that the old phrase that you see in ancient in like Middle English stuff? It's like, "There, but for the grace of God, go I." Right? Like,
Yeah.
as in, like, you take one choice wrong, you accept one deal, and you accept the premise of one of these people, and suddenly your whole life is very different. Like, when you started talking about the dude who is dealing with the 48 laws of power, which
Mhm.
immediately, like, when I read that, I'm like, "Oh, that is, like, the number one sign of this is an awful human being that we need to stay away from, because
Yeah.
that book leads only to MRA, sexual assault, awful human behavior. I mean, it is like the manual to selfishness, right? Like,
Yeah.
it is just complete garbage as a text, and we in the magic community have run into people like Noah Bradley, who's one of the best artists we ever had, who has just turned out to be a real crappy sleazoid of a human, and whose like desktop background was the 48 laws of power. And I'm like, bro, you can't. That's like, if that is the guiding ethic you're using, then you are a bad person.
Yeah.
Mm,
And it's
but yeah,
sad because I think something like that appeals to a strategy gamer because it's
oh
like,
yeah,
okay, a rule set to achieve a
exactly
goal.
that.
But you could also like read philosophers or ethicists or the works of religious leaders even, and all of those will have sets of rules that you can follow to achieve a goal without being anywhere near as awful a human being. Uh,
Seriously,
yeah, and there are
it
other goals than selfishness,
it's just because like when you look at these things, you it's just there's a certain level of like, if you were a certain tier of lonely or of feeling powerless or feeling unable to change, and somebody comes to you and they give you this list of, here is a set of very easily to follow, easy digested steps that will make you a more confident, more powerful, stronger person. And if you are at the right level of vulnerability, and somebody speaks into you and says like, they'll get theirs and you can be the reason they got theirs. It's like, you can be the instrument of your own vengeance, is a very appealing story to a lot of people. Like,
yeah,
we see this in fantasy textbooks all the time. People like Race of Majir and Dragonlance. He's the black robe who wants to grow up and be like, "Ooh, I'm gonna show all you kids who used to pick on me as a kid. I'm gonna become the most strong master of like magic in the world." All these stories have this guy who's just easily corrupted, but nobody thinks they're gonna be corrupted. They're just like, this is giving me a path to power that I didn't have for reasons that are outside of my control.
yeah,
But instead of learning empathy, instead of learning, hey, let's study why we are in this position, or or the fact that our peer group is our peers and not just people I should step on. It's it's easy to fall this way or that way on the ethics ladder, and then just end up into a bad place, right? Like, I'm
yeah,
trying very hard not to just be like insulting or slurs or stuff, but like it is so easy to take like one or two steps wrong. Like, if you look at some of these things in these laws of power, it's like, act the way you want to be treated. That is seems like a reasonable and nice thing to do. Or is it just like these things are written in such a way that is so innocuous that when you don't realize what the path you're being led on
which is
until.
ironic because it describes itself as like the be all end all guide to exerting ultimate manipulation and control or something like that. So
Yeah,
it's
it's
pretty
just
upfront about what it is. That's the
I
blurb on Amazon, you know?
I guess
Yeah.
okay, there's that. But I'm just like, because I'm looking at like the poster of just like, here's the laws in
Yeah.
abstract, sans
Yeah.
blurb. It just like seems
Yeah.
reasonable. And then
Yeah, it
you're like,
does.
hmm,
I agree. I think one thing that was really interesting to me from my career was the reason I stopped playing poker was not just that I burned out on poker. I did burn out on poker, but the
Oh man,
reason
we should
I
talk about that.
really stopped was that on April 15th of 2011, the US government took down the poker sites for US players, and I couldn't play online anymore, and that's what I had done. I didn't play in casinos at all. I only played online. And because of that, and because I had family in the States and didn't wanna travel, I basically couldn't play online poker anymore, and so I stopped. And when that happened, a lot of my peers who had also played poker similarly stopped, at least for a while. And I thought, look at all these smart young men, which is almost exclusively who they were. In fact, I'll just say all of the people I knew and were friends with, um, were smart young men. I didn't know a single non-man who played poker.
Mm,
0 in my friend groups, 0 in my immediate community that I hung out with. And I thought, all these smart young men, they have a bunch of money from playing poker, and now they can't play poker, so they're going to have to go do something else. And it's going to be so cool to see all of the exciting, wonderful things that these smart young men do now that they have to do something else. And like two of them did something interesting, and everyone else like became a crypto scammer or moved to keep playing poker or, you know?
yeah.
Like, I really thought they were
Oh,
better people than that, and then they just weren't.
oh, that's
Yeah.
so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Oh my god, but it's just because all these things are just like I need a quick and easy way to make money in isolation. And then just like I also need to find a bunch of marks that will let me make money off of them because that's how crypto works, right? Crypto
Mhm.
works because it's a pyramid scheme. And like poker, when you're like at the top tier, you're not about winning tournaments. It's about just taking other people's money. Like
Yes.
you just want to be a shark in the casino who just sits there and like you know waits for people who watch poker on ESPN to show up and be like, "Yeah, look, I know how to do this." Like, great, give me your
Yep.
money, please.
It's very predatory.
Yeah,
Very predatory.
and it's weird because you don't seem to me like having read your book and watched your streams a bit. You don't seem to be the type of guy who would have been into poker. I mean, I guess at a certain point you would have been like, "Ah, I guess this is what I'm doing, and I'm kind of good at it." But it doesn't seem like your passion would have been there.
Yeah, it was recommended by a friend. She said that I'd be good at it. Incredibly, the only woman involved in my poker journey basically was the person who recommended it to
Oh
me,
no.
so there you go. She had played to make her way through grad school. I I lost touch with her immediately after starting poker, so she had slipped in my mind. Yeah, it was recommended to me, and I started making more money than my professors were very quickly, and while I was still in college, and I wasn't at a point yet where I was mature enough to be thinking, "How is this job affecting other people? Are there better things I could do with my time?" Honestly, I was at a point in my life where I was looking for some steady footing under myself. I didn't know if I could be an adult. That's scary to young people to
It
become an
sure is.
adult and have your own bills and pay your own medical insurance and
I mean, dude,
s-
that's scary to old people, let alone young people.
yeah, yeah, that's true. It never quite stops, does it? Um, so yeah, honestly, for me, poker was just the thing that was there that was the ladder up out of self-doubt and despair or whatever.
Mm,
But as I played, I noticed, yeah, I don't actually like playing poker that much. I like making instructional content that I can share with people. I like talking to people about poker. I like meeting friends through poker.
sure.
I I like everything except actually playing the game, which is why I found different games I could play instead. Yeah.
There are a lot of people in a lot of communities that I'm a part of who could benefit from realizing that they love everything about this except for the this part.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah, and you
turns
can
out there's
find
a
a different
million
community.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
a million communities. And if you're good at building community and if you're good at finding friends and you love this aspect of it, make the thing at the center something you enjoy, and
Yeah.
maybe your life will be happier. And you won't just
Yes.
sit on Twitter and complain about things all the time because you'll just be too
Yes.
busy enjoying yourself.
Yes.
That's why I moved into doing making bread. It's like, you know what?
Oh,
Bread is fun and I can eat it, and people don't yell racial slurs at me for bread. So
and
it's
it
great.
tastes so good.
Oh,
Fresh bread
so good.
especially. Yeah,
Yeah, I got my sourdough starter going up again, and I'm walking my way back to bread times. It's delightful.
nice.
Man, streaming is hard, and it's like you have to keep it up. You have to go daily. You have to have energy, you have to feel joy, you have to be able to bring it for the same game you're playing over and over and over again, especially if you're somehow tied yourself to a game that doesn't have regular content drops. Then
Yes.
suddenly you're like, okay, well, that's why I look at someone like Mitch Flower Power, who is like, the greatest Super Mario Brothers player in the world. And he sits and plays Mario, Mario 2, Mario, like the greatest Mario 3 player in the world. And he plays like Mario 3 every day, forever. And I'm like, man, that's 35 years of Mario 3. Like, how do you not just evaporate into just like boredom, or not even boredom, but just like you found everything there's to find. What is there
Yeah.
left to do? And it turns out that the interactive part of the community is what keeps you going, right?
I think
So,
that for me, Slay the Spire is also meditative at this point. I think
mm,
that the act of playing a strategy game is quite meditative for me. It allows
same.
me to slip into patterns of thought that are just very pleasant. And whether it's Slay the Spire or not doesn't necessarily matter that much. I enjoy
Mm,
playing lots of different strategy games.
I agree because like I'm also a strategy gamer. Like I also like hardcore into that sort of. And I find that there's some games like Dragon Quest 9 or like Civilization or something where I can fit into a flow state and just be like, oh, look, people are like, oh man, you hate grinding. I'm like, no, when I'm grinding, it allows my mind to just start going and flowing because I don't need to worry about the reps or the tactics here. I know what I'm doing, I know where it's going to
Yeah.
go. And I can just sit and use this as a moment to recenter myself by doing this rote exercise. Like my ancestors would, use rosaries and count beads or, chant or whatever. For me, it's like I know the first 40 turns of a Civ game by heart. So I can do that. And in that time, I can sit and sort myself out while I'm going through my build orders. Um, and I think there's something to be said about that. And that's a really good way to look at it, I think, because it also keeps it fresh. It keeps it from being just stale all the time. Which leads me into the thing that I'd actually brought up to you before we started recording, which is you quote somebody who is like a 30 something year old streamer, and they're like, yeah, the first half of my life, I was building experiences that I would later mine for content. And the second half of my life is just making the content out of that first half. And now I have no experiences to draw upon.
Yeah.
I found that a very poignant and very like important point, especially like when I see people who are like, making magic content or making like Minecraft content or whatever, and your whole life is just literally sitting and doing this one thing for 8, 10 hours a day, every day, and you have no time for yourself and you have no time to develop yourself outside of who you are in this game. How do you handle this? How do you keep yourself rounded enough to be able to keep going back to this mine over and over again without just like finding yourself, losing
So
yourself?
I definitely don't have an answer that fixes everything for everyone.
Yeah.
My therapist casually mentioned, like, yeah, I think you have burnout like 2/3 of the way into our last therapy session. And she said it in a way where she like assumed that I already knew it, which was really funny to me. So so like, yeah, I would say that I definitely have some burnout related to my job. I'm still able to show up and work and my life overall is happy. But there's a reason I'm in therapy for sure.
I mean, it's important to be able to have somebody to talk to who is there to listen to you.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, yeah. Very
I
true.
cannot speak highly enough of therapy with whoever you're talking to therapeutically.
Yeah.
But also, streamer, take a vacation.
Yes.
Go get out of your
Yes.
house. I understand the problem is streamers are going to sit there and go like, but I'm going to lose 20% of my viewers if I take a vacation. I'm like, yes, that's fine. But you know what else you'll have? Health,
Mhm.
happiness, sunlight.
I think the scariest thing abstractly to me about streaming is if you become a person who plays Super Mario 3 for 35 years, and that is the only thing that your stream is about. You're not a person who has an interesting new book that you read to talk about on stream or can chat about Just like anything, like a hike you went on or something like that, bring something from outside Super Mario to your viewers. At
Mm,
some point at some point, there's this false positive where people who want to see Super Mario and don't wanna treat the person they're watching as a human being, watch your channel, and that's actually exactly what you're giving them, like, you're exactly enabling them to treat you in that way. And I don't want an audience who is just interested in watching Slay the Spire and has no interest in treating me like a human being. So it's very important to me that every day on my stream, I clearly show that I am a human being outside of Slay the Spire. I talk about a movie I watched, or I talk about what I think about something in the news, or I
mm,
talk about a friend of mine and something that I like about them.
mm.
And you don't have to spend a ton of time to have an interesting enough life to bring a bit of yourself to the channel every day in my experience, but you do have to spend some time and energy. It is important to be doing things that are important to you away from your stream.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's something that I definitely prioritize more than I prioritize streaming hours. It's really important to me to be getting out and doing things and going on trips and stuff.
One of the worst pieces of advice we got in Western culture is if you turn your hobby into a job, you'll never work a day in your life. The
Oh,
true
no.
answer is if you turn your hobby into a job, you will only be working for every day of your life, and you will never have a moment where you can just sit there and say, I don't want to work. I want to just sit and go and enjoy the thing I'm doing. Because every second you're doing that thing that's not turning it into content, you feel like you're wasting time because
Yeah,
there's pressure that's been given to us by our culture. And it's like, we need to unlearn this. We need to learn that it's okay to be a well rounded human, to go walk with your dog, to go look at a flower. You can come back and play the same game all day, every day, but you don't have to only do that. Go
yeah,
lift weights, eat some yogurt, whatever you need to do to find a joy in your life. And like, just don't let this absorb you and become the only thing you are. Because like I was looking at the streamers that I follow and the ones that I sub to and whatever, and it's like, why do I sub to these people? And it's like, it's not because of the games that they play; it's because the fact that they, as people, are interesting companions through my day. That while I'm doing the things I'm doing, these are people whose voices I enjoy listening to, or conversations with, or interacting with in chat. But they're people who are alongside this game that we enjoy together, are doing something that makes them human. Like watching somebody who is incredibly good at what they do but doesn't talk into the stream and just sits quietly and day in day out or same grinding the thing. Yeah, I'll watch it once or twice and then I'm tagging out because I've seen everything you have to offer.
yeah.
It's
I
a tough
was
grind, man.
I was guilty of being that viewer at some point in my life. Like back when I was a poker player, I was very much about like you have to be the best and that means you have to watch the best. And so I was looking for like the best League of Legends player in the world who I could watch to learn League of Legends and stuff
Oh
like that.
god.
And then eventually I just realized like no, you don't have to do that at all in any way whatsoever. You can watch someone who is absolutely awful at League of Legends and if they're having a good time and helping you have a good time, that's more important than League of Legends anyway, like, by
Yeah, seriously.
miles. By so many miles.
Like
As
we're doing
strategy
this for fun,
gamers,
man. People
he
forget that part. It's
uh,
supposed to be fun.
a hypothesis that I have, and I don't know if this applies to everybody, I would say it doesn't, but I think it applies to more people than you might at first expect. A hypothesis that I have is that people are drawn to games because they're really smart. They like making connections between things, and games are something that they can, like, sort of get under their control and learn all the rules for.
Mm,
But the thing is that life is something where you can make connections between things and get good at navigating life. And I think a lot of people who have games as a hobby are not quite making the next step to saying, like, "Wait a second, like, I could think about how to get a workout in every day, or I could think about redoing my wardrobe or something like that. And this is actually the same sort of pattern as playing a game, and being good at it can be satisfying in the same way that playing a game can be. And also,
mhm.
it can make you better rounded as a human being and happier overall. And so I think a lot of people are sort of stuck in games and maybe afraid to get outside of them because they won't
Yeah.
be good at first. Like
Hmm.
they have some learning to do, or
Challenges are hard. Learning curves are hard. People don't
yeah,
want to fail, especially when they're the best at thing. You don't want to
right.
go to other thing.
Yeah.
But
Or maybe their friends play games and they don't have friends who are into fashion. So they never
l-
make that leap. I don't know.
let me tell you, when I discovered that gardening is just a tactical strategy game,
Yeah.
that you're fighting against worms and aphids instead of against zombies, and
Hmm.
that you can plan and do your worker placement and put your peas next to your radishes or whatever to make sure that they sympathetically grow. And I'm like, holy crap, this is literally just a game, except I can eat the results.
Yeah.
It is amazing.
And you get to be
Changed the way I live
outside
my life.
and touching soil.
Oh my
Gardening
God,
is
it's so much
great.
fun. Man,
Yeah.
this has been a lovely conversation. Thank you so much for joining me.
Of
Uh,
course.
yeah, I'm sorry that it got heavier than I expected, but your book is great and it's really
Thank you.
enjoyable, and folks should check it out. And I scanned the last two chapters while we were sitting here talking, and I'm glad to know that it has a happy ending.
Yeah.
But
Tried to goes brrr and then, tries to level
well,
out
yeah,
somewhere
yeah. I mean, we
reasonable.
got to go through the canyon if you want to get to the other side, right? So,
Yeah.
if folks wanted to find you or learn about your book or your streams, where could they go?
If you Google Jorbs, that's me. I'm on Google. Uh, I am Stephen Flavel is my name. That's where you'd find my book if you Googled me by name. I think I'm the only Stephen Flavel in the world, so you'll find all sorts of things about me. On Twitch, I'm Jorbs. On YouTube, I'm Jorbs. Uh,
Cool.
yeah.
As always, my friends, you can find me at Gearpuri Gears. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are sold, or at Cool Stuff Inc. on Tuesdays, or at YouTube on Tuesdays. Thank you to my editor, EK. You can also find me on my other show, Shivam Wheeler Love Magic, or my other show, which is the Chronicles of Dragonlance podcast, which I don't think I've mentioned on here before, because I like talking into a microphone and people like listening. So I've got three of these things. But remember, my friends, it's not magic without the gathering, and we will see you next time.